Cowboys Training Camp, live from Oxnard, California. Powered by AA Best Bail Bonds, Southern Recipe Pork Rinds, and 94.1 San Antonio's Sports Star.
Howdy, San Antonio. This is Andrew Monaco, and you're locked on the home of the Aggies, 94.1 San Antonio's Sports Star.
It is the Blitz here on 94.1 as San Antonio Sports Star. He's Joe Reinagle. I'm Jason Minix. Our AA Best Bail Bonds Dallas Cowboys Training Camp coverage continues from Oxnard. Brought to you by Southern Recipe Pork Rinds. Not on the Buyers Barricades guest line because he's sitting with us on the tennis courts. Jon Machota from The Athletic. It's fun. It's our annual in-person visit.
Okay, are you sponsored by Nike today or what?
I'm not, but
no?
Man, I just, you know what it is that the older I get, the more I like to just do my shopping online. And so if you find like a product that you like the way it fits, I just end up buying like 2 or 3 of them. So like I have this sweatshirt in a couple different colors. I just end up wearing a lot of, thank you. I just wear a lot of Nike stuff. So
but this week you do look like your coverage is brought to you by Nike.
Absolutely.
If they want to sponsor me, I would gladly take that.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure.
That's how it goes. So it's been an interesting week for us as radio guys. Yesterday we were told we might have Jerry, and they did say tentative, and it didn't happen. Today, same thing, and it didn't happen. I saw you writers cornered him, and
we do.
And he didn't want to talk contracts, which I found interesting because Jerry always seems to want to talk. What was his tone when he was answering questions about not wanting to talk contracts? It's hard to understand context sometimes when you're reading a quote on Twitter at Jon Machota.
Very, it's kind of like we've talked before on this show about how, Jerry was kind of quiet in the off season, didn't really say a ton. And even out here when he talked for about 7 minutes, like over that part of the tennis courts over there. And he didn't, I don't know. It's tough to read him because there's part of you that goes, oh, is he kind of being coy on this? Because maybe they are close with CD and he doesn't want to say something that's going to mess the thing up. But then there's the other part of me where I'm like, I just don't think he wants to talk about him because I don't think he wants to say anything that could potentially, set things back. I don't think anything's changed. I think CD, that contract gets done within as early as maybe in the next few days but before the season starts. The Dak one is the one that's still, it seems like it's a decent ways apart. But even that, he would say not necessarily when asked which one's closer, one or the other, where I think it's pretty well. If you read and into everything that Jerry and Steven has said out here, it seems like CD is pretty close.
It's interesting because just from your tweet, and again, it's hard to say. Did you sense any frustration with Jerry at all?
No. I honestly, and that's the thing about Jerry Jones too. You can ask him anything. Yeah. And even like right there, you can follow up 2 or 3 more times and get him to just keep saying it in a different way. But he's never really, I can't think of many times where he's just been like ready to walk away if you keep asking a question, because the thing for me that I always compare it to is really the combine in Indianapolis, because that's when you're with other writers who have other front office and coaches around them. And I'm not going to name any names, but there are some people, some front office and some coaches that they look at the writers that covered their team like it is just the worst. Like they don't even acknowledge that they're, oh geez, we got to deal with this person. Like they won't even talk. So it's like, for me, I'll tweet stuff like I did that today, or when Steven gives an update, and there'll be people that respond. They're just like, he's not really saying anything, but well, they're talking. And so my job is to tell you this is what they're saying. And so I'd rather have that than them look at me like, get away from me right now before I call the police, So I like that they give us something. But I don't know that Jerry talking out here was going to make things worse. I guess, what is he really going to say at this point? But there is always a part that I guess if you get him talking long enough, you never know what he might say. And so maybe some people have told him, hey, we're getting real close on this. Don't say anything else. Let's just kind of let it lie and see what we can get something done.
Jon Machota from The Athletic joining us here on the Blitz on the Dak contract. And, I've been confident all offseason that I think a deal would get done in camp. That confidence level is dropped. And then I heard Troy Aikman say some interesting things today on the Pat McAfee show. And I know that he is close with Dak Prescott. Are you thinking a deal gets done before camp, or is this going to play out and he'll become a free agent?
I don't. I think that they're going to let him play the season out. I really do. I started feeling it back in March because I was like, well, this is the time, because if you get it done right now, then you have this time to also maybe add some other pieces. I mean, heck, at least re-sign Jonathan Hankins, do some, even if it isn't a major move, something small. And when that didn't happen, I was like, oh, when Jerry says he wants to see more leaves fall, maybe the leaves that he wants to see fall is, can we get past a deep run in the playoffs? And I don't think he's going to say that publicly. There's nobody in the Cowboys organization that has ever said anything negative about Dak, publicly like that. So why would that? But the actions speak louder than words, and the actions are that it doesn't seem like they're super close. When we think of leaves falling, we think of the market, and I saw a Tua Tagovailoa leaf fall. I saw a Jordan Love leaf fall. So how many more leaves need to fall? He had talked about the lawsuit Jerry did the other day with the DirecTV thing. That got settled. That's another leaf falling. Yep. So these have all fallen. So the only one that's left is possibly on the field that they want to see more. And that's risky because then you obviously run the chance of Dak hitting free agency. And I don't think you want to get in a bidding war because you just never know what kind of team could come out of nowhere with some type of a huge offer. So,
John, you were the first guy that I heard say that you thought Jerry was really pissed off after that Green Bay game. Do you think the things that have happened or not happened this offseason are still a direct result from that? Because it seems, and I know Dak said the other day, fans need to get over it, but fans aren't over it. I mean, and you know this as well as anybody. Do you think some of these things are still a direct result from that?
No question. No question. I think that probably comes from the business world too, which I know nothing about, but I think that Jerry Jones probably feels that, some people do their best work when their backs are up against the wall and the pressure is on them. And that's why I don't think he minds whether you talk about Mike McCarthy and his coaching staff in a final year, or Mike Zimmer under a 1-year deal, or Dak possibly playing under the final year of his contract. I think there's a part of him that believes that could bring out the best. And so I think that for him could be the all in that he talks about. Is like, well, it's all in because just think about how different next season would be if you go into that and there's no Dak, there's all new coaching staff. Well, then you were all in on the previous season, So yeah, there's no question. I think he is still in. I don't think that it's like he's there's no way he's as mad as I saw him when he walked out of, the elevator that takes him down and then over to the locker room. But I think that just by what they did in free agency spoke loud and clear to me that, oh no, he was going to be like, all right, well, let's see if you guys can do it with maybe a lesser team. And if you can't, well, then there's going to be major changes in the offseason.
Jon Machota from The Athletic, aside from contracts and all the other stuff on the football field, while you're trying, I appreciate you guys charting practices too.
Yes, absolutely.
Somebody's got to work. Who has stood out to you that maybe is a bit of a surprise?
So I'm a big video guy and charting practice and posting tweets because I know fans can't be out here, so it's a good chance to see it. So I know the fans out there miss CeeDee Lamb, but I really miss CeeDee Lamb because the highlights just haven't been there like there are when it's out there. Same with the Bryant years were great. Mm-hmm. The cornerbacks on the team weren't as great either, so he was really just wrecking guys. So I would like to see CeeDee Lamb back out here for my video purposes. So there just hasn't been as much stuff when you ask about what stands out. Not as many balls down the field. Trey Lance had a nice one today to Jalen Tolbert. And I would say Tolbert's pretty high on my list of people that have stood out. Jalen Tolbert, Tyron Billy Johnson, who every year it seems like you come to camp and especially those first 4 days, you're just like, well, does the receiver look good because no pads are on that? But Tyron Billy Johnson has been really solid. He's stood out. Those couple of reps, I know it's only a couple, but man, a couple of those Tyler Guyton reps against Micah Parsons impressed me because I was expecting Micah Parsons just to embarrass him. And so that was a good sign considering that he might be out there week 1 against Myles Garrett. So I would say that those guys probably stood out the most. Nothing really with the running game has caught my eye that has stood out much. I know a lot of people want updates all the time about Mozzie and Trey Lance, and they kind of look like kind of what you'd think. You can oversell it and act like they look worse than they do. I just think that they look okay, but there's nothing like where you're like, wow, this guy looks like he's really making a jump. The one person I will say that maybe hasn't had a ton of flash plays, but just has been consistent to me is Luke Schoonmaker. And I do believe if he stays healthy, he could have a bigger role, especially for a team that doesn't really add anything receiver wise in the offseason. Potentially he could be a guy that takes a step up and gets more targets. So I would say that those would be the ones. And I do think that we would have seen more out of Sam Williams if he didn't get hurt. That's a pretty big loss for them. I mean, especially when I saw how much they were moving Micah around. That would probably be my number one takeaway is coming out to camp. I did not expect to see Mike at linebacker as much as he had. And so because of that really opened things up for Sam to play a ton. And so it's going to be tough to replace him because they really liked what his upside was for sure.
It's going to be interesting. And, of course, when Steven joined us here on the Blitz on Monday.
Really good stuff you guys did with him, too, by the way. I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you. He was very high on Royce Freeman.
Yeah.
What do you think about Royce Freeman? And is he a possibility to maybe be that guy that everybody wants around here?
It's funny because I listened to all the clips that you cut up, and when I heard that one, I'm like, normally I wouldn't even fire off a tweet about a running back, but because he was so in on that, I think he'd mentioned that they got brought up during the scout dinner or whatever, and because there's nothing on the field that I would say, and maybe that makes me not an expert to some people, but there's nothing on the field that jumps out. But the thing he said to you guys was about the special teams thing. And that is a huge gray area right now in the NFL because of the new kickoff rule. Like who's going to be using these different roles? Talking to John Fossil yesterday, most teams are going to have 2 decent returners. And so I think a lot of teams can have that one Kevontae Turpin, but that's going to be what's so interesting is who's this other guy that maybe we don't have on our 53, but they're like, no. This new kickoff rule, we can use this guy in this role and that. And so Freeman on the special teams thing, when he talked about that, I mean, it bumped him at least 2-3 spots up on the depth chart for me. So that was interesting, but I can't say that there's anything out there offensively that any of the running backs have done that, obviously, for me, I compare everything to 2016, 17, 18, Zeke.
Sure.
Some of those DeMarco Murray years. There's nothing, and nor should you expect there to be anything.
Well,
like
and
that.
again, Zeke's gas tank was about empty, and they let him go, and they were celebrated for doing that.
Right.
Bringing him back, and with I don't think that the Cowboys' leading rusher at the end of the season is on the roster right now. He's not here in camp, and if he is, the Cowboys are going to struggle in the run game. And I hear that about Freeman. All right, cool. Maybe he is a good running back, but I don't know about many bell cow running backs that are also big on special teams. You can't have them both.
Yeah, I would say the guy with the best chance on this team right now that we might not talk about enough is maybe Rico Dowdle. But it kind of goes back to what I said about Schoonmaker, where he's got to stay healthy. But he does have some upside there and some burst to where you're like, man, if this guy could stay healthy for 17 games, he's the guy at the end of the year that maybe has 800 or 900 yards, which would obviously be huge for him. But I just think we kind of know what Zeke is, and he can be a good solid back, but it's going to have to be as a compliment to somebody else. Which obviously, if they bring back Tony Pollard, it would have been a compliment to Pollard, and I don't think we'd be talking about this nearly enough. But I don't think any of these questions get answered in the preseason either. So I'm very interested when other teams start cutting to 53. That's definitely a position I'm going to have my eyes open for.
I thought it was very interesting today because we had Brock Hoffman on, and obviously you're thinking a battle maybe between he and Cooper Beebe. Dak Prescott was very complimentary of Brock Hoffman today, I heard.
No, he was. But so this offseason, with the Cowboys practice facility right next door, there is a training facility where a lot of athletes train at, and they do the offensive line masterminds over there. And Manny Weather, very well-respected offensive line guru. When Zach Martin was holding out of camp last year, he was working at the facility with Duke Manny Weather. The Cowboys have a good relationship with him. And so I went out there for the O-line masterminds this year for a couple of days to just kind of take everything in. And just to give you an idea of like the way this facility is, like, I'm facing this way. I'm indoors, and this is where all the tables of offensive linemen are. And through the glass on the outside is Jamar Chase just working out. Like it's like Myles Garrett works out there. It's a really big deal training facility. And so anyway, when that was done, I talked to Duke, and I was like, asking him, mainly I was going to write a story about Cooper Beebe and Guyton because they have both worked with Duke. And Duke's the one that was like, yeah, I wouldn't count out Brock Hoffman at all. Like, because Brock goes up there a lot, and he's like, I'm telling you, this guy's got something. And it's not, just don't assume that just like, well, they drafted BB in the 3rd round, he's going to take this job. He's like, I'm telling you, Brock Hoffman's got something. And he's kind of like with Jalen Tolbert. You see them doing all the right things in the offseason, hanging out with Dak, around him all the time, things like that. And every time I've seen reps out there, he's the one with the one. So I wouldn't write him off yet. Whereas the thing with BB that's interesting to me is like I can see him eventually being that center, but I think that they also like the idea that what if one of their guards go down? BB can help them there too. So they really like the depth there. But I think the thing that we should all look at is it's unlikely that their center play is going to be as good as Biadasz and certainly not as good as Frederick. So there's probably going to be some growing pains there, whoever is the center.
Although when Biadasz was hurt last year and Hoffman was in, there wasn't a noticeable kind of moment. And it seems like Dak likes him.
Yeah.
And talking to Brock, he got very detailed in our conversation about the relationship between the quarterback and the center.
Yes.
He and Dak are a lot closer than most guys are.
Yeah. Talking about the towel situation.
Well,
and things
the pressure,
the towel and the pressure,
and how Dak likes his pressure.
Very, very, very detailed. It was interesting.
Yes,
it is. That is interesting too, because I bet there's less. No, I know there has to be less and less of that now, just because of the fact that so many of these offenses, we talk about high school, college, or pro, are done from the gun. And so you're not dealing with as much of that under center stuff that was such a big part of the game, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. But I believe that this team is confident that Brock Hoffman can be the guy. I'm not saying that that's why they let Biadasz go, but when they had to make that tough decision there, I think that they were comfortable with well, hey, we got Brock, he can be solid, and maybe he wins the job. And we look back and we go, hey, that's great. But let's also maybe draft a guy, in the second, third round, which they were able to do. And then it kind of grows from there. And so I do think that they did the right thing there. That if you talk about everything that happened in the Cowboys offseason, the biggest positive they did was trade that first round pick back and turn it into Tyler Guyton and Cooper Beebe. I mean, they draft offensive linemen well. Even if it doesn't have huge dividends this year, I think over the long haul, you're going to have those guys around in key roles for a while.
John, I think Cooper Beebe, to me, might have been the best piece in that draft. And I say that Tyler Guyton told us that he watched Cooper Beebe and tried to mirror him in a lot of respects. And so already Tyler Guyton has got a lot of respect for Cooper Beebe, so they've been talking quite a bit. So I like Cooper Beebe, and I think maybe not this year, but the future, he is that somewhere on that offensive line.
Yeah, for sure. I was walking off the field with him the other day, and I felt bad for holding him up because with him being a rookie, he had to do that thing where he's like trying to carry eight helmets like for the entire offensive line. So I'm like, I'm going to keep this as quick. I'll walk with you or whatever. But he told me that most of the teams in the draft process talked about him playing center because he was a guard and he was a standout guard, but there was something about him that teams really liked where they thought he could progress to being a really dominant quality guard quality center. I'm sorry. So obviously he has to work on the snapping and that's going to be something a little bit new for any player that's doing that. But I think that with 5 offensive line spots, they're going to find a spot for him. I mean, you guys know how it is. It's to have that same 5 healthy all year. I mean, I can just tell you right now, just from the Mike McCarthy era, that hasn't happened. He's talked about that multiple times that, the correlation that they do on studies of NFL teams that have that starting 5 throughout the entire season, like the win total is just out of this world because that consistency up front. So if you tell me they have a solid 5 going into the season and it's that same 5 throughout, they'll probably be fine. We haven't seen that in a long time in Dallas.
Last year early. I mean, it was brutal at times. Yeah. Your thoughts on the defense from what you're seeing from Mike Zimmer this year versus years past with Dan Quinn, not only with what you're seeing guys do on the field, but how he is coaching them out there.
It's funny because I came into this camp thinking, all right, we're going to finally get to see more from Mike Zimmer. I think they're going to be as pressing in the defensive backfield, and they're just getting takeaways like crazy out there. So I don't think that's going to change. I think at the end of the day, they got some really good players that can get their hand on the ball, especially and that's without even seeing Diggs out there. So, I'll let me just say that real quick before I go any more on the defense. If people ask me, like, how could this team possibly be better than last year? Like, what would possibly happen? It would have to be that the defense, you keep those corners healthy. They're both ball hawks. This whole moving Micah around even more than he was before just totally catches some teams where they're just not kind of ready for everything, and the defense is dominant. And it's tough to say that because I have a lot of questions about defensive tackle, but with Zimmer coming in, the way his style is, I just think that there's going to be times up front where I don't think they might be as aggressive. I think they'll be probably more fundamentally sound. So that'll help against the run game, which has obviously been an issue, the run defense the last couple of years. I think that's where that comes from, because if they can be fundamentally more sound and can be a better run stopping defense, and then they're still taking away in the passing game, then that's where you're like, wow, I went into the season not thinking they'd be a top, 6-7 defense, and they are, and they're taking the ball away. That would be the way where I'm like, oh, maybe this is a team that, because that defense can travel, you got a road playoff game and stuff like that. That can keep you in a game for a long time. And obviously we saw in that playoff game, when you have a bad defense, how fast things can get out of control. So I've seen a little bit from Zimmer, but I still think that even in the preseason, I think they're going to hold a lot of stuff back. The number one thing by far is just how much Micah's playing at linebacker. And even, like I think I told you guys last week, I love the way that they're running these sets sometimes where Micah's rushing, blitzing right behind DeMarcus Lawrence, because it's kind of like pick your poison in those, and they're going to pick and choose those spots where they use him in. So the one downside from that, though, just to be clear with you guys, there were more splash plays from Micah Parsons last year at camp. Micah just wreck shot from day one at camp, just wrecking plays right and left. And he's still doing that and some, but not as much as last year because they have him away from the line of scrimmage more.
Jon Machota from The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter, especially for those great videos.
Yes.
At Jon Machota. Read them and subscribe to The Athletic. Great seeing you in person, my friend.
Absolutely. Great seeing you guys as well.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. More coming up here from Cowboys Training Camp on 94.1 San Antonio Sports Star.